Hey, Shabbat Shalom Mishpocha, welcome to another edition of Torah Tidbits. This is Torah Tidbits installment number 48, and it is the Torah portion of Shoftim, which means judges, and is taken from Devarim chapter 16, verse 18 through chapter 21, verse 9. I'm going to be focusing on chapter 17, verses 14 through 20. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading because I want to make sure I get everything that I want to get in. I usually just kind of go off the fly and off the cuff, but I'm going to read. In the Talmud, Sanhedrin 20b says that Israel had three commandments once they were established in the land. 1, ask for a king. 2, wipe out the offspring of Amalek. And 3, build a temple. Now, Deuteronomy 17, 14 through 20, Moshe prophesies to Israel what will happen. And the prophet Samuel, sees part of it come to pass with his own eyes in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Now, King Solomon is the one who fulfilled the negative implications of this passage that we're dealing with by not heeding the warning. And you can find this in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 26, and chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. Now, if you'll read Devarim, Deuteronomy 17, verses 18 through 20, it talks about how the king is to write his own Torah scroll, how he is not to amass great horses and great wealth, personally. And so here's a little Midrash, a story that pertains to this very passage, and I'd like to read it for you. Imagine that we are peering through the lattice of King Solomon's palace. Seated upon the massive throne of ivory and gold, and lions and precious stones, sits King Solomon himself. The rich smell of cedar panels mingle with the fragrance of perfume. Here are silks and delicacies of everything delicious to the senses. Around the throne, servants hurry and fuss to anticipate every need and whim of the king. Solomon in all his splendor indeed. But what is King Solomon doing? Standing before him are two priests, holding aloft a Torah scroll. It's rolled open to the book of Devarim. Spread across Solomon's throne is another roll of parchment, over which the king is hunched, pen and ink in hand. He is writing. He is copying. He is writing a Torah scroll. He is fulfilling the special mitzvah of the king to write a copy of the Torah. The commandment for the king to write a copy of the Torah is found in Deuteronomy chapter 17. In which is a surely amazing coincidence. Deuteronomy 17 just happens to be the very chapter of the Torah which Shlomo, King Solomon, is copying as we spy on him. Even now he's beginning to copy down the special section of the law that applies to the king himself. Therein it is written, Now it shall come about, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself a copy of the Torah on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priests. Deuteronomy 17:18. God commands the king to write a copy of the Torah. This provision is meant to ensure that the king himself would submit to the rule of the law and not become a despot without accountability or boundaries. Specifically, the passage says that he shall write a copy of the Torah so that, quote, his heart may not be lifted up above his countrymen, 17:20. In other words, the king is subject to the laws of the Torah just like everybody else in the kingdom. He has no sovereign exemption. He has no royal exemption or special immunity. By writing a copy of the Torah for himself, the king is reminded that he is not above God's law. In the eyes of the Torah, the king is just another citizen of God's kingdom. Knowing this, it is heartwarming for us to see King Solomon so busily engaged in this important mitzvah. But pay attention. Notice the bored and distracted expression on the face of the two priests, which are supposedly supposed to be checking the king's work. Notice the sweat beading on the king's forehead. Notice his nervous smile as he glances at the priests and then uses his finger to daub a jot of ink off of the Torah scroll. It looks as if King Solomon has just erased a letter from the passage he is copying. The priests oversee the work, but they don't seem to notice. The words which the king is now supposed to be transcribing are, And neither shall he multiply for himself wives, that his heart shall not go astray, Deuteronomy 17:17. But what has the king done? He has erased the little letter Yud from the word Yaber, meaning multiply. The Yud is the letter which is shaped like an apostrophe, no larger than one. It is just a small jot of ink, but in erasing that letter, Solomon has changed the whole meaning of the commandment of the sentence. Now it says, And he did not multiply for himself wives, that his heart shall not go astray. But by erasing the yud, Solomon simply has changed the tense of the verb multiply. It is a small and subtle change, but the verse is no longer an imperative forbidding a king to multiply wives. Instead, it has become a statement implying that his past tense multiplication of wives will not have any effect on leading his heart astray. Solomon has removed a jot, a yud. The above scene is more or less described for us in the Midrash Rabbah of Shemot 6:1. There we find a crucial midrash which not only relates to this amusing anecdote about Solomon, but also informs us of our reading of the words of Yeshua the Master in Matthew chapter 5 verses 17 through 19. The Matthew passage is, of course, the famous pro-Torah declaration, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah of the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say unto you that until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter, yud, or tittle, shall pass from the Torah till all is accomplished. Whoever then nullifies one of the least of the commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Within Messianic Judaism, this passage is often touted by the various shades of meaning, but its deepest implications are laid bare in the Midrash Rabbah and Solomon's unscrupulous scribal editing. And to continue on, when God gave the Torah of Israel, he inserted therein positive and negative commandments, and gave some commandments for a king. And as it says, "The king shall not multiply horses to himself, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away." But Solomon arose and studied the reason for God's decree, saying, "Why did God command he shall not multiply wives to himself? Is it not that his heart turn not away? Well, I multiply wives, and my heart still is not turned away." In his great wisdom, Solomon supposed he understood the reasoning behind the commandment. Why did the Torah command a king not to multiply wives? Clearly, God intended this law as a safeguard for the king's heart. Solomon apprehended the principle of the law. He understood the interpretation behind the law against multiplying wives. He thus reasoned, if I keep my heart from going astray, then am I free to multiply wives? Therefore, he felt at liberty to edit the text of the Torah enough to reflect his new insight on God's law. According to this logic, Solomon was able to ignore the literal prohibition against multiplying wives. In his mind, because he understood the principle of the law, he did not need to obey its literal meaning. The Midrash continues the story of Solomon's editing version of the Torah. "And at the time the yud of the word yarba, the very letter yud, went up on high and prostrated himself before God and said, Master of the universe, hast thou not said that no letter shall ever be abolished from the Torah? Behold, Solomon has now arisen and abolished one. Who knows? Today he has abolished one letter, tomorrow he will abolish another until the whole Torah be nullified." God replied, "Solomon and 1,000 men like him will pass away, but the smallest tittle will not be erased from there." To recapitulate, the little letter yud then saw Solomon blot out from his copy of the Torah, was so offended that he ascended to God and filed a formal complaint against Solomon. The letter yud warned God that if this kind of editorial process was allowed to continue, the whole Torah would soon be abolished and nullified. God placated the letter yud by assuring that not even the smallest decorative crown, which is a tittle, would ever be erased from the eternal Torah. God points out that Solomon and men like him are temporal and passing, but God's law is eternal. Solomon may ply the wisdom and logic and creative scribal work as much as he likes, but God's law will still stand long after he has disappeared. In the Midrash, Solomon goes on to explain his rationale to us. Solomon says, the reason why God has said, "Neither shall he multiply wives unto himself," was only lest the king's heart be turned away. God is with me, and I will withstand this temptation. Solomon is confident that in his own wisdom is superior to the rule of Torah. With a terrific sense of irony, the Midrash continues, "Yet what is written of Solomon? For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, and his wives turned away his heart after other gods," 1 Kings 11:4. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, "It would have been better for Solomon to clean sewers than to have this verse written of him." And this was taken from www.rabbiyeshua.com. I hope you enjoyed this Midrash. I'm running out of time, so shalom and Shavua Tov Mishpokah.